Abdolreza Abbassian, he is senior economist at the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, which released these numbers. Pretty remarkable chart that we were looking at there. We keep hearing about commodity prices and commodity price inflation falling back a little bit, but actually, when you look at food price rises, well, just this year, we are at levels, well, even higher than where we were at the food crisis just a few years ago, 2008.
Yes, well, what is remarkable is that the prices of this food, which we monitor on at least a global level, haven't come down in spite of all the uncertainties and economic conditions that prevails in these days. So if you compare, for example, financial equity markets, these prices have been basically stable for the last 2-3 months and stable at extremely high level, as you mentioned. We are up 26% from last year, but last year this time we already were under the influence of a very high prices because of the restrictions on exports from Russia. But we are up almost 50% in 2 years. So there doesn't seem to be much relief in seeing a big correction in prices, at least given the conditions we know today.
So where do prices go from here?
Well, we don't, as you know, we don't make predictions about what will happen in terms of prices. I don't think, frankly, with the kind of market conditions we are in, it is possible. But what we see today is that obviously a lot is coming from the corn sector and the very tight corn market, which is giving support to cereals and to some extent also oilseeds. But for meat and dairy, which you actually mentioned, well, unless there will be some rationing on the demand side, I'm afraid the high input costs will be basically raising the output prices, the final product prices. Sugar has come down and quite sharply. Probably that's the only one where we see, in fact, also more volatility in it. But in general, I think the situation is not changing that rapidly and seems to be quite stable, but at very high levels.
Right, so what about the prices of wheat and soybeans? We've seen those surge, well, over the course of the past year or so. What are conditions like now for those two crops?
Well, the wheat is much better this year than the situation last year. For one thing, we had a huge recovery in the CIS countries from the drought that we had. And conditions generally are good. Even in Europe, where the situation was not very good, it looks like that there was some catch-up was done, later in the season, and the rains came. So the situation is not that bad. And on top of it, I think that we are now looking at Australia. The conditions there are extremely favorable. Wheat is good, but wheat has to substitute quite a bit of this corn, which we don't have for feed. So there is a lot of substitution taking place there, even in the case of US, which is providing lots of support for wheat. And that the high quality wheat is not as abundant as we would want to. Look at the spring conditions in the US. So, but having said that, the maize situation, the wheat situation is far better than corn, which is at its historical low in terms of a stock-to-use ratio at the global level, and of course similarly so in the case of the United States, which is biggest producers. The soybean conditions are favorable. In fact, one of the things that happened last month was that their prices averaged down, whereas the corn prices were going up. So there is the question of the supplies, which are quite abundant. It's not that bad. But again, it's the feed factor, the economic conditions are going to be quite influential in how these prices will unfold in the coming weeks and months.
All right, good to talk to you, Abdolreza Abbassian of the UN Food and Agricultural Organization.